right, welcome back into another episode of the Idea Collision. I'm Andrew Green. I'm the host of this podcast. If you have just found this and are curious as to what it is, every once in a while I just kind of give a brief description of this podcast. This is obviously a podcast with a name like the Idea Collision. It's here to make you think. But this is not just any podcast that makes you think, but this is here to improve your life, the life of those you interact with, in some meaningful way. We take a look at all sorts of ideas, but with a view to their spiritual application in our lives. So we look at things from a cultural perspective, or maybe at something in education or political, sometimes if we have to, historical things, events. And one of the common threads that we've maintained throughout these is that we have an impact on other people. We've looked and we started out this looking at kind of the intergenerational impact, but even in one moment in time, we are impacting others on an individual basis, but we are also a part of the collective of a society, and so everybody's input kind of shapes the society that we're in. And so it's fairly broad, though we don't think of ourselves as having a great impact. We are a part of that collective, and so on a small basis, we impact that. And we've been talking about agenda for several weeks, and we've established a few facts. That is, first of all, everyone has agendas. I have them. This podcast is an agenda. And we've also established that having an agenda is not wrong in and of itself. Right? We're all designed to have an agenda. Where we disagree is over the specific agendas that people have. We disagree with them, and so we like our agenda. Obviously, I've never disagreed with myself, but So there's this war that happens over agendas, and that's true now. Unfortunately, right now we have a new front, or it seems to be more of a front. Maybe it's always been there, but in this war of agendas, and that is schools. Now, some people will bemoan the impact of college campuses in the role of agendas and how it interacts. But really, colleges have always been the proving ground for ideas, right? Your kids go away and they're finally free, they feel independent, and they want to test out the ideas and things that they've thought privately and felt maybe intimidated to express in the home, or felt like, I want to explore my own identity, right? So colleges have always been this area to do this. Now maybe there's a slight turn recently in that only certain ideas are able to be explored in college campuses. That is kind of a negative, that if you are exploring some ideas, that's not acceptable, and you can face retribution for that. Again, I'm not old enough to know that that's always been the case or hasn't always been the case, but it just seems to be more pronounced. But that's not really where I want to focus on. What I'm focusing on today is what goes on in grade schools and increasingly in younger ages, and that's kind of one of the areas we're going to look at. But how the young, more impressionable people have been the front for the promotion of these agendas, and so how is it? I want you to think about this. How is it that our kids are so aware socially and politically? And I think one of the things that people will do is they will blame social media. That's the easy, low-hanging fruit. And I'm not to say that, I'm not going to try to deny that social media plays a role. It certainly does. But social media is just, by definition, it is a medium. It is just it's a format. It doesn't do anything in and of itself. It's not positive or negative in and of itself. I know we like to blame it for things, but they don't, by their own nature, indoctrinate. They just are a means of communication. So is an avenue for kids, well, people of all ages, depending on your preferred social media. You communicate your likes and dislikes. So the question is, where do they get their likes and dislikes from? Why is it that they are, I mean, you think of kids. What are kids' likes and dislikes? Right? When you were a kid, what were your interests? Well, you had, depending on your age, friendships, who your peers are, that was important to you. The activities you were involved in, right, doing stuff, entertainment of whatever type, again, this depends on your age, what it looks like, So it might be, TV when you're a kid. If you're really old watching this, you remember like a drive-in theater was fun. If you're video games, like whatever form of entertainment, concerts, things like that, that's what we're interested in. Food, pretty much, especially if you're a teenager. Clothing, very, very important, especially if you were raised in the 80s. That was extremely important. Eventually, maybe not in the younger ages, but eventually romance is romantic themes are an important thing to the life of a growing person. These are our interests. And I want you to go back to when you were in school, depending on your age group. This, if you just recently graduated from high school, you'll go, no, this makes sense. If you're older, let's say if you were in high school prior to cell phones, right? I think probably this is the borderline. But you think of the people that were politically active or social, very into social agendas, that they were kind of the odd ducks in school, right? We had them in the 80s. But they were odd. They were not the norm, because those are not naturally the likes and dislikes of a teenager, and certainly not the likes and dislikes of a person in 5th grade. But now we find that they are very aware, very even active in these areas and promoting things, and their artwork is in this. Why? Well, someone is presenting this to them. Someone is instilling these ideas in them, because it's not natural. So who is instilling this? Well, in some cases, it's parents, and I forget her name. Her name is Greta. She's in Europe somewhere, but she was in the news a lot. That's on one side of it. There's a kid on the other side of the aisle. His name was Eric Sandman. Just high school kids. Where did they get their extreme passion for political things? Well, it was probably their parents, But in most cases, especially as you get younger and less likely to be naturally interested in this, because listen, the DNA of children hasn't changed. It's educators who are promoting these agendas, right? When I was young, it was right around the time where we changed the name of history class. I still call it history, but they started calling it social studies. Why? What was the need for that? Well, that was the beginning of the transition. Now, things hadn't advanced very far by the time I graduated, in 1990. But it was very shortly after that I was hearing stories, and I almost didn't believe some of the stories. I'm like, oh, or I would dismiss it as, well, that's New York City, New York City or San Francisco or L.A. or Chicago. These were some of the areas where some of these things were happening, and it's grown, it's increased, and it's spread out, and it's everywhere now. It's in your local school system. all ages, down to kindergarten, pre-K. Some of some of the very bizarre things that you hear, and it's almost we almost reject it because it's so bizarre that we can't imagine that this would happen in our country. Well, so teachers started instilling their beliefs into the education. Now, at first, it was merely a parallel education. It was merely, while we're teaching this, we're also going to instill some of our values. So we'll have a time where we put this book in the library, or we introduce this idea, or we just talk about this kind of separately. But now it is actually, there's another step in the transition, and this is that classes are now a vehicle for agenda. So let me explain what that means. This is the transition. History, social studies, is now for the purpose of teaching several themes. So, some type of class envy, some type of alternate view of a societal thing that we want to push. It's not about teaching a date that when something happened or what have you. We have science. Science is now about teaching a climate scare, right? Health class is now about teaching gender politics. Math is about teaching economic politics. You see, every class, they've figured out how to get an agenda into every class. And I know that this sounds like a scare tactics. I want to get to my point. This is not my main point. I just want to support my assertion. This is an assertion. That could be wrong, it could be right. During COVID, when classrooms were online, there's a number of things happened, but one of them, I remember several stories. They could have been just isolated. It could have been just an isolated thing, but I can't remember if it was a teacher or if it was a school system. I remember one case in particular was in Virginia, and that there were kids that were threatened with grade retribution if their parents observed the class. Now, it wasn't just they didn't want their parents interjecting or didn't want them in screen. They couldn't be off to the side. Now, I don't know how they know that, but the parents couldn't even be silent off to the side observing the class. Well, what's the purpose of that? It's not impacting any other kids in the Zoom classroom. Well, it's obvious. There's only one explanation. They did not want them to observe the material that was being presented. That's the only logical explanation here. School boards soon, and for the last 3 years or so, have, and maybe this is before, and we've caught wind of it now. But they were now being scheduled, especially when it was a curriculum thing that was going to be introduced, and parents are now more aware as there's social media, and they can stay aware and communicate with other parents. Hey, we're getting this assignment. What are you? So people becoming aware of things. Now, these meetings where they were going to vote on something or present something were now scheduled in secret. They were scheduled at inconvenient times. Parents were not informed of these meetings. And in some cases where they came, limitations were installed to prevent parents from speaking about any opposition to certain topics. So there's no parental input, and it's even gone to the extent where in the last year and a half, the Department of Justice of the United States has even targeted and put pressure on parents who have shown up and expressed disapproval over some of these topics. And that's a real thing. Curriculums and mature themes have been aimed, and I mentioned this, at lower and lower and lower audiences. Audiences that are not capable to even handle the material, but it's being pushed. And to such an extent where now it's so important to instill these values that there's only this period of time to do this in it, and there's such a pressure to get these values into kids that they've eliminated many, many schools and many states have eliminated recess because we have to have the time dedicated and allocated to pushing these things into kids' minds, because we only have them for 12, 13 years, and we want them to have these ideas, the teachers' ideas, the people who are promoting these things. They want them to leave with their ideology, not the information, with the ideology. That's important. Now, I say all that, right, not just to complain about things. I don't want to just emphasize the negative. I just wanted to establish some real situations that are happening around you. There's no spiritual value in just grousing about negative things or complaining. But we can't get to the spiritual application. We can't make a difference. We can't do something positive until we accept the fact that these things are happening. Right? If I deny the problem exists simply because I don't want to confront it, well, then it's going to continue and get worse. So the first question we have to ask is why, really? And there's a couple of why questions, I guess. But why are they promoting this, first of all? Why can't we just let kids be kids? Well, see, you and I are made for an agenda. We're designed for it. Agenda. We have agendas because we need them. I need them. You need them. Right? An agenda gives me purpose. It's the things I want to accomplish. I need something to accomplish in life. And that's where I get my identity from. That's where I get my meaning from. And my identity gives me my agendas. It works kind of like in a cycle. So those who guide the system have agendas too. They have a desire for meaning and for value and for all these things. However, theirs is, for whatever reason, it's not governed by their faith. We decided that faith had no part in education. Someone pushed that agenda a long time ago. And it's caught on slowly but surely. And so our schools are not allowed to, as one, I was talking with one parent recently, and they said their kid was supposed to be in this play where they were going to be representing and acting out the part of the Greek gods or Roman gods or whatever. But she went in, she's like, wait a second, we can't talk about the real God. We're forbidden to do that, but we can talk about, these gods that if you look at the history of them, what horrible things, we're going to talk about Aphrodite, the goddess of sex, in an elementary school with like a fourth grader, but we can't talk about a God, a loving and kind God. What's wrong with this picture? They have an agenda, but they've eliminated, because of who they are, they've eliminated the spiritual nature of things, and specifically a Christian faith is eliminated. That's the worst of all of them. And this is not true of every person, by the way. There are a lot of, I know personally, educators who are very frustrated with this. They feel ostracized. They can't talk because of fear of retribution with their jobs and things like that, very limited. It's the people that make the syllabus for classrooms. It's the people that design, the lesson plans. It's the people who write the curriculums and promote these things on a government level, on a state board level, wherever they are. And they don't have a spiritual agenda. So they're going to have something replace it. It has to be an agenda. Now, remember, agendas are designed to make you feel valuable, right? That's the purpose of it. However, you and I, if you're a Christian, you know that these agendas are repulsive to you. Right? You could just look at anything in the news and see how repulsive some of these things are. Right? But in a strange way, they're going to appeal, or they're designed or structured so as to appeal to a spiritual element of a person. I'm not saying Christian or moral, but the spiritual side. Let me explain that. All right. So it's like, if you think of it like an inoculation, right? An inoculation, a vaccine, you get a little dose of the thing, and that prevents you from getting the big thing. Right? That's the point of it. And so they get a little dose of this thing to address a spiritual side, and that keeps you from wanting the real spiritual thing. And so they are wanting to push in these classes and tied to the curriculums things that, superficially fight for what they call DEI, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion, or something to that effect. It's a big deal right now. Familiarize yourself with it because it's in every corporation in the United States. So fighting for this replaces a more superior unity that is found in Christianity, right? Diversity, equity, inclusion sounds good. It's like a spiritual thing that we want to do, being nice to people and including and all that. But Christ actually teaches us to treat people better than ourselves, which is even better than DEI. So they have a little bit of it. It's like this little agenda that they have, and it keeps them from having the real thing. Right? Christ teaches us to take care of the eternal destination of our souls, but if you don't believe in that, what do? Well, the next big important thing that you can think of is the earth. So let's take care of the earth, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but we start worshiping the earth. Right? Earth Day and all these other things. If you want to make a difference, but you put no stock in faith and Christianity specifically, what then? Well, politics is your next best avenue. Activism is your next best avenue. So why are they so focused in ingraining these in kids, right? Well, think about this from your perspective. If you're a Christian, and if not, maybe you were raised Christian, and go back to your life, or somebody, right? We bring our kids to church. We send them in a Sunday school, or if you're Catholic, a catechism, whatever it is, right? To ingrain your agendas in kids and have them leave with your moral viewpoints. They don't have that. They don't go to church. So what are they going to do? And this is important. They can't get away from that aspect of themselves. But since they've eliminated the Christian aspect, they have to replace it with something. We get all angry at that, but this is what Paul says. The Apostle Paul wrote, listen, in Romans, he says, basically, we're shocked that they're not moral, but he says they're not subject to God's laws, and in fact, they're not even capable to do so. It shouldn't surprise us that how degraded the things are and the agendas are that they push. They've eliminated the idea that would give you a good agenda. So they're going to try to address those same basic needs of the person, but the agendas that they're going to be pushing are going to be very negative. So their belief system has to be passed on. They have this belief system, and they feel the need, just like a parent going to church would feel the need to pass on their belief system to their kid. They're going to pass on to children. They're going to have a mission. They're missionaries. They're religious. This is a religion to them. Now, they won't say it, but this is their religion. The schoolroom is their church building, right? Their evangelism is in their teaching. Right? The Bible is their curriculums. It's just a different church. You're sending your kids, if you're sending your kids to schools now, you're sending them to a church. It's just a church that doesn't believe in God. It believes in all these other things that replace God. It's different agendas, but it's agenda, and it's aimed at trying to address the basic needs of humanity from an inferior perspective. Now, as I said, this is not to just grouse about the negative. I want to end with something positive here. I want to go back to what we talked about. This was seen in 2020 and 2021 when kids were at home. This is precisely why they didn't want parents watching. They didn't want parents to see what's going on because they knew it was not going to be approved of. And it wasn't. Homeschool rates prior to 2020 were at 3%. Now, I don't know what they are right now. Statistics take a little while to catch up. But as of a year ago, coming out of COVID, it had jumped to 11%. 11%, an 8% jump in the number of kids that were homeschooled. Why do you think that is? It's because parents saw firsthand what was being pushed. Now, maybe some of them got tired of homeschooling and sent them back. I don't know. But the only way to turn things around for a society is for adults to get invested in some way. Now, several things to say here. One, homeschool is not for everybody. Maybe private school. Somewhere where morality and true virtue will be taught if you can afford it. Secondly, you might not have kids, or your kids might be grown. What do I do? How do I take this podcast and do anything valuable with it? Well, in whatever area you deal with children, that's an area to be aware of the things that they're saying and and a need to correct some of those things as you can. Gently, not in their face, and not like everybody that's pushing their agendas in their face at school. They need direction, or maybe you need to get involved in mentoring if you're not really involved in kids. Or maybe it's as simple as having a neighbor with kids and trying to get them involved in a youth group somewhere. Right? Or maybe you're watching this as a person that's just kind of curious what this podcast is. Maybe you aren't convinced of these things spiritually. Maybe what you need to do is, for your own self, find a place to observe a superior idea. Maybe these are ideas that you've had. You've found these valuable because they were feeling like they were addressing things that you think are valuable in society, the environment or whatever. I'm not saying there's no value in any of that. Wanting to include people and make people's self-esteem and all these things that we feel are valuable. But maybe you need to measure that against a more superior method of doing that, which you will find if you can find a genuine church. Some churches aren't genuine. Some churches are now into the agenda stuff, like secular society, no different. Find a contrasting view and immerse yourself into it and see if it's not superior. I'm going to leave you there for this week. If you like these podcasts, subscribe to them. However you're consuming this, if there's a more convenient way for you, search that out. We have audio podcasts. We have it on video, whichever you prefer. We also have a lot of links that are available in the for other material, things through our website, through our church, and some of those other links. So give those a look. The only way that we make a difference is by spreading something positive to the world around us in a small way or in a big way. So I hope you are affected this week and come back for another episode next week.